Peace, everybody. Icey-Ice. Right now, I'm with one of the most inspiring b-boys to me, which is
Icey-Ice, Corey Montalvo.
Thank you for this moment, though, Corey.
My pleasure.
I've been a huge fan of the New York City Breakers and you as an individual since I was a kid, and I never thought that I would get this moment to speak to you. And I just kind of wanted to share your history with the world today and kind of get your point of view, how you feel about breaking.
Definitely. Well, the first part of that question, as far as my history, I started back in the summer of July 1980. Ironically, even though I was born and raised in New York, but my first visual experience wasn't actually until I moved over to Queens, New York City. Long Island City, Queens, New York to be exact. I was about 9 years old. But my first visual experience or my first encounter with any aspect of hip-hop culture was when I was 11. And I saw an individual. He was probably considered, well, he would be considered actually a first-generation b-boy by the name of Clemente Marino, a.k.a. Kid Freeze. He was also an original member of the Dynamic Rockers. And it was actually at a birthday party. We were celebrating his sister's 15th birthday. And for the first time, I saw something that I never saw before up to that point. And of course, eventually I learned that was called b-boying. And he was actually the one that took me under his mentorship. It was literally the day after that, he approached me. I'm assuming it's probably because maybe he saw something in me, maybe a certain potential that I didn't see. I was only a kid. So, he invited me with the opportunity to be able to learn to dance. And I said, yeah. And of course, when I came into it, it was just like any other hobby. I came into with a very, what you call a very playful mindset. I was a kid. Unbeknownst to me, I never knew that I was going to do something big with it, or that eventually I was going to be maybe even inspiration to a lot of people, as many people over the years have approached me and have told me in one way or the other I've had an impact on them in terms of, I guess, what they saw in me when I came into my own identity as a b-boy. And I guess in a nutshell, that's pretty much how I started.
That's amazing. I just wanted to ask too, before you got into the New York City Breakers, you was a part of Rocksteady Crew though, right?
Actually, no. No, I never was a member of Rocksteady Crew.
Oh, okay.
My first introduction of any crew was actually the Dynamic Rockers.
Okay.
And it was because of Kid Freeze. And what's interesting was that my first, I guess, experience with the commercial aspect of b-boying was only really 6 months into b-boying. I really didn't have any experience at all, to be honest with you. And it was when we were battling against Rocksteady Crew at the Lincoln Center battle. I think that took place sometime around 1981.
Yeah.
Or something like that. It was early in the early 80s, and I was just starting. And I was going head to head with big people like Take One, Frosty Freeze, Crazy Legs, Kippy D was there. You had you had the original founders of Rocksteady Crew that they were there also, plus all of the dynamic Wavy Legs and Spinner, myself. You had Kid Glide. At the time, I wasn't even called Icey-Ice. I was actually called Little Glide because I was still actually coming into my own identity. I was trying to find my way. And so he gave me that name until eventually I became known as Icey-Ice, which was a name that was actually given to me by the guy who started me, Kid Freeze.
I like that. With the name being Ice, Icey-Ice, and Kid Ice, and just a lot of that. Where did that come from? As far as do you know the origins of why b-boys started adapting the name like Ice to their name?
In all honesty, the origins I really don't know.
Okay.
But it was the term Ice was always something that was used by a lot of people. You had Mixed Master Ice. You had all kinds of ice of this and that. Icey-Ice just sounded really good to me.
Yes.
And a lot of times too kind of represented kind of like maybe how you wanted to come into your b-boy. So to me, it was about being rock hard, ice cold on the dance floor.
Oh,
and so that
right.
resonated with me too.
Okay.
That whole mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Icey-Ice, being cold, coming on hard, and things of that nature.
That makes sense because the early days of b-boying, I remember Kid, actually Powerful Pex used to be called Kid Frost.
Exactly.
He was Kid Frost.
And that was his graffiti name for him.
Oh, it was?
Yeah. Yeah, he used to be an artist, a graffiti artist back in the day.
So that's where you got that's why he was called Kid Frost?
Yeah.
You know there's a Kid Frost on the West Coast, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard of him, yeah.
Yeah, so there's Kid Frost, Frosty Freeze, Mr. Freeze. So yeah, as a child, I was always kind of intrigued by like everybody got the Ice name.
Right, right.
So I kind of wanted to adapt that to myself,
Yeah.
and that's how in so many ways, the concept Icey-Ice got developed.
That's awesome.
Because I was looking towards, you guys on the East Coast,
right, right.
with all the ice, names involved. Would you say, what would you say, in your opinion, was one of your most historical moments that you ever battled?
Well, definitely Lincoln Center battle. In terms of like the beginning stages of my b-boying evolution, yes. Definitely the Lincoln Center battle. And then I've had so many after that. I was very fortunate. I just think for me, I was just happened to be around at the right time. Mm. And somehow everything just came together where I was just very luckily meeting the right people who wanted to take a talent that originated from urban street culture and do something big with it. Like, for example, Julie Farad. Mm-hmm. She was actually a seasoned dance choreographer for like 14 years at the time. And she was actually the one that came up with the whole concept of Magnificent Force with me, Mr. Wiggles, Pop Master Fable, Fast Break, Kalima Mohammed, among others. But we were like the first. It was only really just about like 4 or 5 of us. And I was like, it was myself and Fast Break who were the only breakers.
Yeah.
And she wanted to actually do something with the dance because she felt that if you didn't actually do something with the dance, she felt that maybe later on it would become a fad, quote unquote. At least that's what she thought. Mm-hmm. So we would do a lot of like theater workshops for like nuclear disarmament, particularly over Europe, man. We did a lot of stuff. There was this one guy, you can say he was like a liaison for us. Mm-hmm. His name was Nana Vasconcelos. He was really big percussionist, particularly overseas. Anybody who knows a little bit about the jazz world, he did like collaborations with Pat Metheny, among other famous jazz artists. So he was really big in Europe, and we traveled all over the place with him. We went to like Brussels, Belgium, Sardinia. We went to Italy with him, and we would literally do these theater workshops because at that time the whole thing about nuclear arms proliferation was really big. The whole Cold War between Russia and the United States was going on still during the 80s. So it was kind of like a political type thing. Right. And a theater thing, but involving b-boying with the hip-hop culture. Right. And also to a certain extent, you could say, too, that was actually even the beginning stages of what eventually became known as hip-hop theater.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Okay. Even though we didn't go into it with that mindset, but essentially when we look at it now, that was actually the beginning stages of it. Even before Rennie, forgot his name, Rennie Harlan. Not Rennie Harlan. He's real big. He's got his own production company. Yeah. He was actually part of Magnificent Force even later on in the years, and now he travels all over the world using b-boys and lockers. He's been doing that for a long time. He's a very established production guy and choreographer and things of that nature, using b-boying and different aspects of hip-hop culture.
So would you say, like, in the beginning of your early days, did you know who Float was from Incredible Breakers?
Yeah.
Because I heard he was really amazing at power. I guess Fast Break said he was his mentor.
Yeah, I met Float later. Okay. I don't really remember, in all honesty, when I met him or what year, but it was definitely in the early 80s. Okay. And he actually started working with us. Julie Farad came into contact with him. Like, we did a show together in this one place called the Brooklyn Academy of Music. It was me, Kid Freeze. He was a part of that engagement. Among others. Fast Break was a part of that engagement, among other people too. And it was a big thing. It was like a whole hip-hop theatrical type thing. Yeah. Over here in New York, in Brooklyn. Oh, that was probably maybe about, I would say, 83, 82. Yeah. Give or take within that time frame.
Yeah. Man, so like the concept of the halo, I know you explained that to me. Can you share with the world, like, are you the creator of the halo?
Yeah. The thing with the halo, as I was explaining to you in our private conversation, once I learned the foundation of the dance, and I really started mastering that, all of a sudden, all these creative juices just started flowing through me. And I was always a very analytical type of guy. I would analyze the moves. Back then we didn't have internet.
course.
You know, we didn't have, you know, it was about either you seeing people visually in person do certain movements, or maybe going to someone else's block to see something for yourself that you maybe just heard about up to that point. And so that was with my experience. And of course, being around a great teacher like Clemente Marino, aka Kid Freeze, and him doing a lot of the traditional stuff, I would analyze those movements. But one thing that he always drilled in me, be original. You know, don't bite nobody booze. You know, he was always telling me, make sure you try to find your own identity as a b-boy. So at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, you establish your own personal legacy, and that's what people are going to know you for. And so that always was basically resonated with me, and that's exactly what I did. And so when I would look at the windmill, of course, it was shoulder to shoulder. That was pretty much the traditional way. And I said to myself, well, what about if I can actually take it higher, more elevated, and more maybe in a 45-degree angle? And instead of doing shoulder to shoulder, which is what traditionally what people would do when they would learn the windmill, or the original name, by the way, was called neck moves before it even became windmills. Just so
it wasn't called continuous backspin?
No.
Okay.
No, not that I know of.
Okay.
Maybe I'm wrong, but
Crazy Lake said he called it continuous backspin.
Yeah. It could be.
Okay.
You know, so don't quote me on that. But from what I remember, because I would be a second generation b-boy, by the way.
Okay.
What I remember is originally at least the first term that I came across was called neck moves, and then eventually, as the dance started going forward, eventually they started calling windmills. So that's how I came up with the concept. I said, well, you know, why not try to take it where I control around my head? And that's how I started doing it. Kid Freeze was actually the one who came up with the term halo. He took it from a religious photo where they would have an angel with a halo. And because it kind of imitated the whole encircling around the head, that's how we adopted the name. And I said, well, that was great. A lot of the moves that I was responsible for innovating, he was actually responsible for naming, like my name, Icey-Ice, for example.
Yes, can you share that? How'd you get the name? Explain how you got the name Icey-Ice.
He just came out with it out of nowhere. I remember, if I remember correctly, we're talking now quite a time ago, I think we were just in I don't know if it was in my house or it was in his mom's house. I don't really remember right now. But he was actually the one that came out. He says, Corey, he says, Icey-Ice, you know? And I like the name. And ever since, that's how I stood with the name.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. To me,
it was original too.
Yes, it was original.
Right.
Exactly. There's nobody in the b-boy world that had the name Icey-Ice.
Right.
Even my name in the b-boy world, there's nobody to this day in the breaking room that had the name Mikey Ice.
Yeah.
So it was, like you said, it was always about being original and not biting. You know what I'm saying? Like make your own and stick with it.
And it was catchy.
Catchy.
Yeah, like Mikey Ice. Mikey Ice is a catchy name. Icey-Ice. I used to love the names back then because back then you had Crazy Legs. I loved that name. Ken Swift. You know, Kippy D. That was an awesome name. Kippy D. You know, Norm Ski.
Yeah.
You know, like Ice. Like there was always a lot of skis. You know.
Yes.
You know, all this stuff with ski back in the day too. That was really big back then too.
You know what? I read up on that, and I think it was in the New York City Breakers book. They was explaining where like the ski fashion. Can you explain to me how the ski fashion became a big thing in New York? Because I noticed back in the day, the b-boys always wore the goggles, the big hats with the little thing, and they would say the boing-yoing.
Right.
Like when the ski fashion started to become like a big part of hip hop and breaking culture.
I'll be honest, I don't know exactly when it started.
Okay.
If somebody who knows a little bit more about the fashion aspect, I'm thinking it probably even started before I started.
Okay.
Probably maybe the latter part of the 70s, but don't quote me on that. Because I think that a lot of people were. But I think it became more accentuated during the 80s. Because then you had the sheepskins, you know?
Yes.
And then people used to literally starch their hat to be able to keep it pointed.
Oh, that's what they did.
You had the permanent crease Levi's.
Right.
You had the devil jeans where literally it had figurines or caricatures of devils in the back. Of the pants.
Yeah.
You know, the devil jeans, I mean, that was all big back then. You had the Kangol, you had the Gazelles, you had the British Walkers. All that stuff was, everybody used to rock that style.
Right.
You know, and sometimes when you look really good, sometimes you had to go with a posse of people. Because if you walk down the street by yourself like that, the term back then, you were going to get vicked. In other words, you were going to get robbed.
Yeah.
You know, and you'll come back out naked out of the neighborhood, literally.
Right. From my understanding, what I read, they were saying that I guess the ski fashion was kind of a way of like being like futuristic.
Probably.
You know, because back in the Bronx, people the fashion wasn't too hot. So if you had the big ski glasses, ski goggles, it was like you're like advanced, like being futuristic. From my understanding.
That could be. So I got to be.
Right.
You know. Yeah.
So yeah, that's.
To be honest with you, I never heard it from like that point. I would think that at the end of the day too, I think that when it came to fashion, you know, it was just the way you representing. Because back then, fashion went pretty much hand in hand with b-boy culture.
Right.
Not so much now.
No.
Maybe with some people, but back then they went hand in hand.
Yes.
You know, you wanted to look good, especially once you started establishing a certain what they call repertoire for yourself, a reputation.
Yes.
You wanted to look good. You wanted to represent.
Yeah.
And you went out there, you know, with the fat laces and the hard shell Adidas, you know, and everything was pristine and clean. We used to clean our sneakers with toothpaste, you know.
Yeah.
And keep them nice and clean, you know. The sheepskin was sharp. Everything was sharp. You had the mock neck.
Yes.
You know, it came up to here. That was how we rap. We used to rap.
Yeah, for me, on the West Coast, fashion was a huge thing because I remember I used to get my fat laces and I would put them in the sink and I would use dishwashing soap.
Wow, look at that.
And so I would wash all my fat laces for the week. So when I put them on, even though I had the same pair of Pumas, it made my Pumas stand out because the laces were fluorescent orange, fluorescent purple, red. So fashion was a huge part. The nameplate belt. If you had a nameplate belt with your name on it.
And then we got the nameplate.
And the nameplate chains.
And then I don't know if you guys in the West Coast. Yeah. I had the 4-finger ring. Icey-Ice, you know?
Yes. Yeah, so you're right. Like, for us on the West Coast, it was kind of like if your fashion was really on point, you were saying to the world, like you're the truth.
Yeah.
You're the truth because kids, back when we were in school, they kind of came to school basic.
Yeah.
If you seen a guy with the Kango and he had the Pumas, he had the Puma jacket that matched the Pumas and the fat laces and they were clean. Like, honestly, he could literally rule the school. People will follow him around school and, like, pay for his lunch.
Yeah.
I'm just speaking for us.
No, it makes a lot of sense because, you know, when you look about it, at the end of the day, I think that the main objective of that was to really just bring a lot of attention to yourself.
Yeah.
You know, there was a lot of bravado going on, a lot of testosterone with us guys. You know, we wanted to just be our best. And also, too, a lot of us, you know, we wanted to impress the girls.
Yes.
I mean, you know, it was all about that too. You know, you wanted to look good. You wanted to try to be as much impressive with the ladies as you possibly can be. There was a lot of that mindset going on too, especially when you used to go to a jam.
Right.
Yeah.
In the 80s or when you was coming up, I've only heard maybe about 2 or maybe 1 B-girl that was spoken about a lot. Her name was Headspin Janet.
Right.
Do you know any history about Headspin Janet?
Not at all, to be honest with you.
Okay.
There was another girl too, I think, the B-girl Eva.
Eva, okay.
Yeah, I think it'd be girl Eva, but I never met her.
Okay.
Yeah, in all honesty, when it came to the presence of women, it was very, very minuscule.
Oh, it was?
Yeah, very minuscule. And I think that the reason was that because it was a predominantly male-dominated culture, for one. Also, too, it was very aggressive.
Yeah.
You had guys go out there hardcore. You know, you did have guys that were members of gangs. You know, and they would bring that street, you know, attitude or that kind of aggressiveness even to the dance floor.
Yeah.
Maybe that would probably be the reason why a lot of girls maybe shied away from it.
Right.
Because oftentimes, things will lead into maybe a physical altercation too.
Yeah.
You know,
it did for us too.
Yeah, it will lead
to a lot of testosterone, like in
without a doubt.
When we was coming up, like growing up in South Central in the neighborhood, it was very gang infested. So the only way you can really get your reputation was either you was a basketball player,
there you go,
you was selling drugs, or you was a dope b-boy.
Look at that.
So if you was a dope b-boy and you got burned, word of mouth went through the neighborhood. So that was like the worst thing is when you come outside and everybody's like, yo, Mikey Ice got smoked.
Right.
It's like, it was like, what? Like, how'd he get smoked? And then it literally got a lot of people infuriated because they believed in you so much that they would go out and a lot of times they would go look for the dude.
Yeah.
And then when they would catch up with him,
they took it personally.
They took it personal because they was like he was like our Jordan. Is like how could you smoke Jordan? You know.
It's interesting that you bring that point because with me, my animosity went as far as the dance floor, but after that, I was like your best friend.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because Mr. Freeze used to always talk to me about that. He says, Corey, you were the only guy, or one of the few guys that we used to actually be able to get along with. Because at the end of the day, it was just a dance, And so early on, I would say by nature, I was always pretty much a pacifist anyway. I never was the type of guy I wasn't a fighter. I wasn't belligerent. I wasn't any of that back in then. I was surrounded by people that were that way. But I was very fortunate to never adopt that mindset.
Okay.
I wasn't one of those tough guys. I wasn't none of that guy. I was a pacifist. I was very quiet, actually, very timid. But my aggressiveness would be expressed through my b-boy. That's when the animal came out of me.
Yeah.
But when you met me, I was very docile, very shy. Sometimes you're very reluctant even to speak to certain people, you know. But on the dance floor, it brought out another persona in me, to be honest with you.
Yes.
But I never took anything personally with any of the guys. I got along great with Rocksteady crew. On the contrary, I was even a fan.
Okay.
With a lot of those guys. I had a lot of respect for them. The same thing with, of course, Dynamic Rockers, and all these other guys in Mag Force and, all these other crews too that I didn't even know about, or rather that I knew about, but I didn't actually have any kind of affiliation with. Like, back in the 70s, you had Star Child of Rock.
Right.
You had the Commando crew, the CC Boys. You had TBB, the Bronx Boys, started by Eric Abbey Diaz and his brother Batch, Angel Diaz.
Did you know about the Zulu Kings back then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they were part of definitely Zulu Nation.
Right,
Africa Bambaataa,
Did you ever see any of the Zulu Kings back in the days when you started? Did you ever see them get down?
Not really.
Not really.
Not really. And if I did see them, it wasn't because I really knew, because I didn't really see their name being enumerated or being, kind of putting out there, to be honest with you. So no, from my recollection, no.
Right. Because I know that's an early 70s crew.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm thinking like 70s.
But those
75.
are the architects.
Exactly.
Those are the guys we pay homage to.
Right. I think by the time we kind of start getting close to the 80s.
B-Boy Rubber Band.
Yes.
Those are the architects. Those are the guys who laid out the foundation. Of course, they had no idea that we were going to be architects. Track 2 from Star Child of Rock. Another guy, first boy, Abby, from TBB, the Bronx Boys. They had like 10, 15 chapters all over the place. Him and his brother Batch.
Yeah.
They just had that leadership in them, that charisma.
Right. So yeah, I remember, but we spoke about this earlier. The 80s vibe compared to today. Can you explain to them, like the people who we just shared upstairs, like the difference from your point of view?
One thing is explaining it. Another thing is being able to understand the vibe that we had. But the vibe was amazing because what you sensed was there was an emergence of something special that was coming up. Even though b-boying already had been around for a while, for example, back in the 70s, but it wasn't until the 80s when you have more of the commercialization aspect being infiltrated, and now it was going to be introduced into the world. That's when I came in as a second generation b-boy. But it was organic. It was still raw. We still had that level of aggressiveness because we were still from the streets. But now we had this transition where we were coming from the streets, but now to be able to do something professional, unbeknownst to us, because none of us actually ever thought that would be an opportunity that would actually befall us. Or not befall us, but actually, fall into our hands.
Right.
It was just an incredible experience.
Right.
But, the good thing about it was that, and because it was brand new in the sense that now it wasn't just confined to a certain demographic. New York City in this case, with the Latino and the Afro-American kids and things of that nature. Now it was being exposed all over the world. From the introduction to Wild Style, to Flashdance, to Beach Street, to Breaking 1, 2, and 3, and the list goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
All of a sudden now you had a new genre, a new demographic of people coming from all over the world now being introduced to this dance and being equally inspired the way that we were inspired. Even though our inspiration was actually different because it was a way for us to be able to identify with something that other than that, we would have not had anything to identify with. Because keep in mind, coming up in the Bronx, particularly in the Bronx, as well as other urban areas in New York City, it was like living in a cesspool.
Yeah.
I mean, you had the introduction of crack in the early 1980s. During the 70s, you had even the exposure of heroin that was even being pushed by even the corrupt police department at that time. That's how that movie Serpico came out with Al Pacino some time ago. That's actually based on a literal historical account that took place in New York City. You know, it was just crazy. And so when you live in a place that also was eventually known as the postcard of, of urban decay, that was New York City for you.
Yeah.
It was like living in a war zone, literally. And so what did we have to identify with? Absolutely nothing. Programs were being taken away from us. You know, there was a point when Reaganomics came, like in the early 1980s. They started taking away funding, government funding that would allow for a kid to be able to go to, say, like maybe community center to learn a trumpet. Now they no longer had that to their availability, unfortunately. So what the b-boying did, it was our way to be able to take something that we innovated and make it our own to eventually become explosive all over the world. You know?
That's so true.
That's the amazing part of when you talk about the historical unfolding of the evolution of hip-hop culture.
Right. So since a lot of the breaking was outside in the wintertime, how did you guys do it?
Buildings. We used to rock in the buildings.
But it's still freezing.
Yeah, but we used to do it nonetheless. We put out a piece of cardboard, you know, and then later on we graduated to linoleum.
Yes.
You know, for those of us who had some little bit of money to scrap up so that we can buy a piece of linoleum, but mostly it was just cardboard, or sometimes not even none of that stuff. It was just the floor itself, you know, made out of some type of ceramic toweling or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. Oh, man. So I remember watching, like I said, it was a TV special documentary. It said New York City Breakers versus the Los Angeles Midnight Breakers. And you came on and you said, you know, I'm going to say it straight up. There's no competition out here in Los Angeles. You saw New York got the freshest kids.
My apologies to my brothers in California. That was my cockiness back in the day.
What was your mindset when you was actually battling these guys, though? Like what was you thinking when you seen the introduction of the West Coast at that time?
Well, we actually thought that California wasn't really that good yet, to be honest with you. Now, of course, to our surprise, like you and I were discussing earlier in our conversation, it wasn't until like the mid-'80s that suddenly California just completely flipped it and became a powerhead.
Yes.
You know, and then you had all these incredible crews that came out of California, and California was able to unequivocally establish its own when it came to b-boy culture on the map, right from California, and on their terms.
Right. Fast forward that by the time we got to the early 90s, I want to say like 95, there's a crew, a friend of mine's called Style Elements Crew. You ever heard of them?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so Style Elements Crew was the crew.
That's the one with Pole One and Crumbs.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was the crew that was responsible for elevating breaking to another level. That actually made it super world famous, though, because they were the first American crew to go to Battle of the Year and to win.
I totally agree with you that. And what was incredible about Style Element was how everybody individually possessed a style that was unique on its own. Because Crumbs by no means is Pole One. Pole One by no means is, I've got this guy. Remind was incredible. I can see that guy. I never had the opportunity to meet him. Hopefully one day I'll meet him.
He's my best friend.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Love to meet him one day. I used to watch his videos and said, this guy's incredible.
Yeah.
But a style of his own.
Exactly.
You know, a style of his own. That's what made Style Elements, exactly Style Elements. Because everybody had their own elemental style in which they were able to express individually.
You nailed it. That's how the name Style Elements got developed, because when I met them, Remind told me that he has a style to every element. Yeah. He could rap.
Powerful.
He could dance.
Yeah.
He can hip hop. He can lock. So he said, I can do a style to every element. Style Elements.
Exactly. I've had the good fortune of meeting Pole One several times in different travels. I think the last time I saw Pole One actually was back in when we were at Poland, Warsaw Challenge. I had the opportunity to judge there. Yeah. Along with him. I think he was one of the judges too.
So Ivan and Remind is the founders of the name Style Elements.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So you're teaching me a bit of history. That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm there with the guys.
That's awesome.
And I give you the short version of that. So I'm over at Crumb's house and we're sitting down watching some videos, and Ivan Remind is talking, like he was like, Ivan was like, I can smoke you. I got better moves than that. And Ivan said, Romain said, let's go to the garage. So they go to the garage and they battle and they come back into the room.
Right.
And Ivan was like, I got you on power. I got you on headspins. And Romain was like, bro, like I smoked you on dancing. I smoked you on that. He said, I did a style to every element. So he was just like, I remind you what hip hop's about. Style elements.
Nice.
And that, to me, I seen it firsthand. That was the birth of the name of Style Elements because Ivan and Romain.
Awesome.
They went at it and they was explaining like because Ivan has a complete different style than Romain.
Mad respect to those guys. You know, they definitely have their history and their legacy.
Right.
You know, and even Crumbs. I mean, look, he's been dancing for so many years.
Yeah.
And what I like about Crumbs is that I don't know him a lot, but like I saw him even recently. But he's very level-headed. Mm-hmm. You can tell he's very articulate, very intelligent young man. And you know, he's been dancing even longer when I was dancing professionally. He's been around. Yeah. You know, he has a lot. He's definitely a seasoned dancer. The same thing with Paul Wine, and I'm not sure. Is Romain still dancing, by the way?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
I just talked to him on the phone.
Shout out to all you guys, by the way. Man, respect to each and every one of you.
Like, everybody's still dancing like crazy. Romain loves it. He dances like every day.
Nice.
Yeah, he still gets down, and everybody's still around. I'm glad that, like, everybody in the crew is still alive.
Nice.
So, like, everybody's got their own part in their lives. Everybody's older, mature. They got family. But everybody still breaks.
And you know, now that we're talking about this, you see how not just one group is responsible for the contribution of what hip hop's become today. Mm-hmm. You know, we have it's like a puzzle. Mm-hmm. That puzzle comes with different pieces, and so you have style elements. They played a role in putting a piece in that puzzle. Same thing with the New York City Breakers and this crew and that crew and that crew. You know, we've all had our contribution over a period of time. You know, not just one. Mm-hmm. You know, and of course we have the architects, like we were talking about earlier, like back in the 1970s. Though they had no idea that eventually they will be recognized or acknowledged as architects, but essentially that's what they are. Because had it not been for them laying out the foundation, we wouldn't be here. Right. You know, and so that's what we need to respect is the legacy. Yes. You know, is to be able to understand the cultural foundation of the dance, where it come from. And so I think that what you're doing is a great thing because we're sharing literal oral history for those of us who've had the blessing to be able to be a partake in an era that, again, these young people are never going to understand, but that we can try to convey to them as best as we possibly can. Yes, without having bias. Without having bias. And I try to keep away from that. Right. You know, because I used to have that mentality back in the day, but I hope to think that as I've gotten older, I've gotten wiser, and I've grown to be a bit more mature. Yeah. You know, now I embrace and I listen to people because I don't know it all. Right. And I know that I'm only a part of somebody who had a contribution, but there are many other people like Crumbs, like Remind, like Pole One, you know, and so many like yourself, Icey-Ice, and the list goes on and on and on. Yes. Yeah. Thank you, though, brother. B Street. How did B Street impact your life? Where when you did the movie, like after the movie, did like things kind of start opening up for you, more opportunities, like the travel and stuff? So. Yeah. I mean, up to that point, I was already traveling extensively. Oh, you was on Magnificent Force. Yeah. Yeah. We were traveling pretty much all over the world. I would be literally out of the country like maybe 165 days out of the year. And you, at that time, you probably was 16, 17? I was like about 14 years of age. You had a passport? Yeah. I got my first passport through the Magnificent Force, Julie Farad. How was that for you, like being that young, like just seeing different? Because this is my first time in New York. Yeah. So for me, I didn't know that. Yeah, a lot of people don't know. I'm ecstatic that I'm in New York. Awesome, man. Yeah. So I can imagine for you being like overseas and like coming from Bronx where everything's burned down, tore up, and then being like that question, Mike, because besides the b-boying, it has given me experiences that I never in my life would have thought that I would encounter. Experiences that are etched in my heart and in my memory for the rest of my human life. Yes. Because it wasn't just the b-boying. It was the places that I was able to see. I'll give you an example. I remember my first European trip. We went over to perform at the Zurich Jazz Festival. The late Miles Davis was a part of that venue, by the way. Oh, okay. Okay? I was already in awe. I didn't get to meet him or anything like that, but the fact that I was a part of something that he was a part of, that in itself was like surreal. Never forget this moment. I was walking down this street in somewhere in Switzerland, and it looked something out of a postcard. It was like nothing but picturesque. Looking over the Swiss Alps. And I was there standing, and I couldn't believe, how is it possible that a kid from the Bronx is actually here, and I'm able to actually see this for myself. Those are the moments that they stay etched to me. Yeah. Besides the b-boy, I had amazing experiences with the battles, performing professionally, being able to experience the best of two worlds, but also outside of that, those experiences, and then meeting people like Lionel Richie, performing with people like L.O. Cool J.
Oh,
you know, meeting and performing with people like the Treacherous Three, Kumo D, L.A. Sunshine, Shannon, you know, the famous pop singer during the 80s, and the list goes on and on and on. Again, never thought that b-boying would open up those doors for me as it did.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Was the pay pretty decent for you back then?
It was good, but I was so unwise with my money that as quickly as it came in, brother, as quickly as it went.
What was you buying back then?
I was buying everything. I'll take 10 or 12 people to a movie theater. Yeah. I was buying, you know, gold chains or nameplates and Levi's jeans and just splurging money away.
Yeah.
And we were making good money.
Yeah.
You know, especially too, we had endorsements. You know, we were being endorsed by Heinz, which was that suit that we used for the presidential inauguration in 1985.
Yes.
When he was inaugurated as president for a second term.
Were you guys actually sponsored by Reebok?
We were also sponsored by Reebok. We were sponsored by Puma.
Yes.
You know, so we did the whole K-Tel International, you know, where they actually did a tribute album to us, the New York City Breakers.
The New York City
the 3D
Breakers.
view.
The big time money makers.
Yeah, there you go. That was with the Us girls, Sha Rock, Lisa Lee, and Ruby D.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the record behind us.
Yes, it is. That's it right there. Yep.
Oh, yeah. And what year was that?
Ooh, that was probably maybe 82, 83.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I remember correctly. But yeah, that was it. And then inside that, they had a poster of us.
Yes.
And we had our own signature.
Yes.
Besides our image.
Man, that's some... Man, Corey, like...
We became ghetto celebrities.
That's what I was gonna say. Like when you guys were back in the neighborhood, like how was it? Like how was like the everyday people when they knew that you guys were traveling the world? Like how was life for you when you would walk through the neighborhood?
Oh, it was mad respect. You know, even people who otherwise would maybe give us a hard time extended to us respect. You know, because we were representing their community, so to speak. You know, you know, we were from the Bronx. You know, some were from Manhattan. You know, all the boroughs. Right. So, you know, we were representing New York culture. Yeah. You know, we were bringing it to the map, so to speak. And so, yeah, a lot of people really, you know, embraced that. Right. You know, the fact that we were representing them and a culture that they also, either they were directly or indirectly a part of. You know, in some way or the other. Yeah. I know that feeling. You know, I mean, I didn't get to that level where you guys was at. But just within my community, I remember there'll be times I'll just be walking down the street and I'll see a little car drive by and I see a kid going, "There's Mikey Ice!" It's awesome, right? And the mom's like, and it feels good. Yeah, the mom's like, get in the car, Cosito. Yeah. And, you know, and the kid was like, we're at a stoplight and he's pointing at me. And the mom's like, I'm a grown man. The boy's like 6, 7 years old and he's losing it. And the mom's like she didn't understand. But I had that impact too, where the mailman will see me, you know, people. Nice. I can be walking at night. Somebody will yell, "Nice!" You can only see my silhouette. Yeah. But that because of breaking, I established a reputation, like in California, anywhere that I go. Nice. I remember one time I was at just sharing a story with you. I was at Applebee's. Applebee's, okay. You know, and I went out on a date, and it was he was a kid. He was a waiter, and he seen I had a b-boy like on the top. Yeah. And he looked at me and he was like, "Can I take your order?" I was like, "Yeah, let me get the fettuccine." And he's like, "Is that a B1 top of your head?" I said, "It is." He said, "What's your name?" I said, "Icey-Ice." He said, the girl was like, "What's wrong with him?" He got a moment. He choked up. Wow. And he was just like, "Oh." Yeah. He's all like, and I was just looking at it because I was dressed. I wasn't dressed. Right. I was just dressed, whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
But just the fact that this kid was a waiter at Applebee's, that he recognized me, and I never met him.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that's one thing I've always appreciated about breaking. It always supersede like your name.
Yeah.
If you kept your name if you keep your name basically respected.
Right.
Because in the b-boy world there is people where it's like if you was the opposing, if the people knew that you was like the opposite, like people would try to call you out on the spot. I've been called out on the spot, like in front of just people in regular clothes.
Yeah.
So it depends like your reputation of who you are,
Makes sense, yeah. I went through similar experiences too, so I can definitely relate to where you're coming from.
Oh really? You went? What's one experience can you share with us?
Oh, I remember one time I was walking down the street. I had a sheepskin and I had Adidas. I was looking nice and fresh, like they used to call it back in the day. And this guy wanted to rock right there. And we went out at a piece of slab of concrete. We started going at it.
No music?
No music. It was karaoke style, b-boy.
That's how it was.
B-boy karaoke style. Yeah, he called me out. I said, whoa. I didn't want to b-boy because, I was looking good. I had my sheepskin going on and I had my Adidas. I said, okay, let's go.
That's one thing about the b-boy. Like that's our code of, that's our badge of honor, because like Ramon said the best, like the b-boy is like a bee, like we sting. The nature of the bee is the sting. So that's the nature of the b-boy, is to sting somebody. And to us on the West Coast, if somebody called you out and you walked away, it's kind of like you got stripped of your title, because a b-boy, we never turn down a battle.
Right.
There's been many times where like I blew out my knee or my wrist is like
did you?
Yeah, and
I happened to my wrist, by the way.
Right. And the
that
guy
was from a practice session.
Oh really? Yeah. And the guy called me out, and in my mind I know that I'm not, but it was just like, I guess I put that into my head. It was just like I'm gonna accept this.
Yeah.
And I'm hurt, and I basically damaged myself more.
Right.
But that was just our mindset. We was told don't back away.
Yeah.
A b-boy never turns down a battle.
Yeah. It was like that warrior spirit that actually just resonated within us.
We're warriors.
Yeah.
Literally, we're warriors, and I think
just through the expressiveness of bodily movement called b-boying.
Right. I think the b-boy mentality is it's like a Jedi mentality.
Yeah, I like that.
Because that's what me and Ramon, I say it mainly though. I consider myself like the way that the Jedi, like we have a secret knowledge, we have a code, we have an understanding. And there's very few of us. There's a lot of breakers, but the b-boy is the one that understands like the knowledge is first.
Right.
We know who the DJs are: Grandmaster Flowers, Grandmaster Kaz, DJ P Jones, the graffiti writers,
that's awesome.
Phase 2 Dundee, Crash. You know what I'm saying? The MCs, Grandmaster Kaz,
Grandmaster DXT.
Yeah. That's to me. That's the b-boy in us. If you're gonna be a b-boy, we come complete.
Yeah.
We come complete, and we did more than one element. Like even though I was breaking, I started off popping first.
Oh, look at that.
And then I would get like a little Sharpie, and I would tag my name, like with the sticker says "Hello, my name is."
That's awesome.
But that was just. I guess that was like the memo that I was taught.
Right,
you know, if you're gonna be a b-boy, do it all.
Right.
You know, just don't break. I learned by just learning all the elements. You know, like of hip hop.
And that's the way it was, even with a lot of the DJs, like Grandmaster DXT. I don't know if you know, he used to be a b-boy.
First generation.
Yeah, and that's why he brought. I remember I had the good fortune of performing when I was in Maggot Force.
Oh yeah.
And there was this one part of the show where I had to come out as a solo act, and it was at this place called Soundscape in the Village in New York, here in New York City. And boy, he had 3 turntables and he knew how to set it off.
Oh.
Because he was a b-boy. So
exactly.
he put the music on, boy, and the rest is history. Between what he was doing on the turntables and what I was doing on the dance floor, we were just rocking the house, boy. It was just one of those ha-ha moments,
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to wind it down with 2 more questions, Corey. I appreciate your time.
No problem.
The first one that I want to ask, when the conversation came up with the breaking going into the Olympics, I know you guys are excited about it.
Right.
Did you watch it when it first aired? When it came out on TV?
Well, later, to be honest with you. Not when it first aired, yeah.
But when you seen it, what did you think? What was your point of view? When you seen like how the whole thing went down?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, there was that
ray gun.
Right. Exactly. You know, that was like a little sidestep there, a little hiccup moment type thing. And I guess apparently, from what I understand, it was a little bit politicized as far as what went on behind the scenes, as far as because I don't know how she even made it.
Right.
With all respect, you know, but she shouldn't have been there.
Right.
In all honesty, she wasn't representing b-boy culture at all. Again, I say that respectfully, you know, not to disdain anybody, but as a b-boy and as someone who knows the dance, like yourself, I don't think that should have actually should have occurred. But as far as the overall experience, I think it was great in that because it introduces the culture now in a different light.
Okay.
You know, now I could only imagine, and based on what I've heard, a lot of things behind the scenes made it problematic in a sense. You know, I guess there's a lot of kind of like red tape, kind of like bureaucracy that people had to go through in order to be able to for it. And I think that certain things need to maybe be better organized. And I think that I could be wrong here. This is just merely my pure speculation, my personal opinion. But I think that they should come to people like ourselves who've been exposed to the dance for a long time. We can be able to relate the dance from it being a street, having street credibility, to something now where we can actually be able to be also a performance element too, because we've been able to taste the best of both worlds. And I think in a sense that we should have had more opportunity to kind of be kind of like involved in consultation.
Yes.
So to speak, you know? Not so much because we're looking for accolades, but because of our experience that unequivocally we can bring to the table. Because we do have the experience.
Right.
You know, I mean, I was a street dancer before I became a professional dancer. I can tell you there's a great distinction between both of the worlds. I was involved in theater dancing, and I was involved in raw battling on the streets. You know, just like I was talking to you about, I can tell you the best of all worlds. You know, I was there when everything was just at the cusp of it becoming commercialized with the introduction of Wild Style and Star Wars and Beach Street and all these other films that came out that eventually brought it onto the world front for it to be introduced now to, you know, globally. So, you know, I think that we have some type of credibility.
Yes.
And certainly we can articulate a lot of things that a lot of people, even though they may have the funding, they may have the sponsorship, but by no means do they have the knowledge.
Oh, that's the most important.
That's the most important thing, I think.
Because that's going to last 100 years from now, 200 years from now, the knowledge.
Exactly. Because if you don't have the knowledge, yeah, you can have the money, you have the deep pockets. Obviously, the Olympics, you know, they have money that, you know, they can just splurge like crazy. But at the end of the day, what we want is not just so that we can have somebody who can maybe could have the opportunity to gain a gold or a bronze or a silver medal, but at the same time, we want you to approach the dance with a certain degree of respect.
Yes.
Because it is a culture, you know, and in order for you to be able to have that type of sensibility, why not come to those of us who actually know what that sensibility is? Because we've been there and we've done that.
Well said. Okay, the last question. How do you feel about breaking in hip hop culture today? Like seeing it, if you've been paying attention, like what is it in your heart, like to you today, like seeing the level of breaking today compared to what it was in the 80s?
I was watching in an interview when the whole thing about the Olympics was coming out, and there was this one guy, I wish I could remember his name to give him the credit for it. He was the one that said it. He said that it's very much like what the 80s was, except on steroids. And I love that phrase. And I could understand what he means, because what they're doing today is incredible. The level of stamina, the level of power, the coordination is incredible. And then not only that, you have different styles. I mean, let's take, for example, B-Boy Crumbs. Very abstract type of style, you know? And you'll take somebody like B-Boy Gravity. Or you'll take somebody like B-Boy Victor. You know, he's got more of that flavor, you know?
Right.
You know, and stuff like that. Whether it comes from California, from New York, I don't know, because I don't know much about his history. But the guy's incredible. He's got like that traditional style, you know? And the list goes on and on. But it's just, these guys, they go out there. Some dance, some do not.
Yeah.
They may have the power, and which they do. But when it comes to the dancing, they lack in that area.
Yes.
And then you have some that basically they're the entire package.
Right.
You know, they have the power, but they also have that pizzazz, that class, that finesse. You know, they really know how to dance with the music.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and which dictates their moves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you agree with me on that, because you know you're more involved in the scene than I am.
Right. I feel everything that you said. I kind of feel like I wish that the B-boys today that they did have that salsa like in their top rock.
I like that.
Yeah, let me see that.
That's that song.
Yeah, let me see that storytelling. You know what I'm saying?
There you go. A great word.
I want to see the storytelling. The music is
Great word.
it has a story. Breaking is always relatable. Like whatever the music is saying.
Yeah.
I feel like you should relate to that. I know they want to go straight to the power and get crazy, but it's like this dance comes from storytelling.
Right. And I think that a lot of the B-boys today should study the traditions of the past.
That's what I said.
And try to even kind of like maybe allow for there to be a resurgence.
Oh my gosh.
You know? Because I'm going to tell you something. I wish there were moves from the 70s that I would see today being incorporated in footwork today.
What moves would that be?
Like sweep swipes. They have like the Russian.
Yeah.
You know, and things of that nature that they don't do. You know? Even kind of like the style of Frosty Freeze. I remember when I was growing up, Frosty Freeze, I thought he was whack. But it wasn't until I grew and I became more mature.
Right.
I really started appreciating Frosty Freeze's style because he had a 70s style that you don't never see again.
Yeah.
I mean, when he died, that style died with him.
I know.
Because there's just never another Frosty Freeze.
Right.
Because he represented an era that no longer exists.
Mm.
You know, and it was just beautiful to watch.
Yeah.
You know, the same thing with Fast Break. Fast Break, you know, his combinations, he had power, but his power was more with combinations.
Yeah.
He wasn't a power head in the sense of doing halos, no. But he had power in the way that he expressed himself with the footwork, you know, the tracks, and everything was just flawless.
Yes.
And he was able to fuse from one thing to another and just do it flawlessly.
Yes.
Little Lap, you know, original member from the Seven Deadly Sins, you know, Ray Ramos, you know, who recently passed away.
Yeah.
You know, awesome.
Yeah.
Some of the amazing tracks that you saw represented a style that was. Now, I wish a lot of these new guys would take what they do today, but also hold down those traditions and that flavor from the past.
Right.
And imagine if they take that flavor and that attitude like Ken
Oh
Swift
my gosh.
and incorporate it in what they do today, these kids will be super nasty.
Oh yeah.
Because they're what you're saying, you know, they're storytelling. You know, they're representing something as a respect to the forefathers, but at the same time, they're representing something that they only know because it's a part of their era of today.
Oh man. Thank you, Corey.
My pleasure, brother.
Everybody that's watching this is this is probably one of my favorite interviews of all times because, like I said, Icey-Ice is it's a huge inspiration to like Mikey Ice. The names are extremely similar. You know, we come from the same era. You know, he started on the East Coast. I started on the West Coast.
Yes, sir.
And I just wanted to share his story today in 2025.
Yes, sir.
That's what's amazing, though. In 2025, in 4K.
Yeah.
This is going to be in 4K.
Okay.
That's the highest quality of video today.
That's awesome.
So I want to thank you, Corey, for sharing your time.
My pleasure, man.
With
Peace to each and every one of you. You know, keep it going. I certainly appreciate you, Mike Icey, for taking the time to even interview me because it brings me back down a road of nostalgia.
Yes.
And it's just nothing but fond memories. And as you can see, you know, there's a joy talking about the past, you know, and just to be able to see exactly what you guys are doing. I think you're doing a fantastic job, by the way, documenting this because we are getting older.
Yes.
I'm about to turn 56 in 2 weeks. We got guys that are older than myself. There's going to be a time that we're going to pass away.
I know.
And so we're going to try to share this oral history as best as we possibly can and try to get it as much as possibly documented as we can so that hopefully young people, they can be able to take what they're learning today, but at the same time have a greater appreciation for it because they have something like this that you're doing to learn from.
Right. And to me, it's a good way to give you my contribution back because I love hip hop. This is my first time in New York. This is my first time seeing the Bronx.
Awesome.
I'm jumping up and down inside because something that I love. I remember the first time I went to the movie theater and I seen B Street, and the dude was like, "Man, it's my dream to get a band in New York City. He's like, this ain't New York, this is the Bronx. When he said that as a child, I wanted to see this place so bad.
Awesome.
You know, I was 12 years old, you know, and that was the first time I heard anything about the Bronx. So the fact that after all these years, I was staying with Speedy, you know, and we're in the Bronx.
Right.
And I go outside and honestly my eyes got watery because it's like, it was like if you just go back to Mecca. Right. You know, or like anybody going back to the original homeland where like the culture started.
Exactly. The land of the forefathers.
Right. Exactly. So I feel very complete. There's almost one more other thing that, like you said, though, I want to share with you. The history to the, it was called the Ninja Freeze. Yeah. The Ninja. Yeah. Can you explain to me, like, how did you come up with that concept?
The concept came about because at first I was trying to learn the flair. You know, back then, back in the 80s, you had a very famous gymnast by the name of Kurt Thomas. He was actually the one that innovated the flares. Right. And they called it after him, the Thomas Flare. But for some reason, as much as I tried to get that move, I couldn't get it. And so I came out with, instead I took my own take to it. Came out with what they call a quarter flare in the air into a stomach roll into a twisting air track. But somehow, doing also that movement, I was able to also do a twist in the air.
Oh, yeah.
And when at my peak, particularly when I was with the Magnificent Force, I would actually be able to throw myself around 2 or 3, sometimes even 4 times in the air, and land very lightly on my feet, face down with my arms spread out like an eagle. My partner, the one who trained me, Kid Freeze, he was the one that came up with the term ninja. The reason for that was because of the way how I used to twist, but how lightly I landed. Oh. It was like stealth. Very, very lightly. And he liked that. He says, you know what? We got to call that move the ninja. And that's how I stood. And it wasn't until years later that I found out from some Japanese cats, some Japanese b-boys, they used to call it the atomic freeze.
Okay.
Yeah, in Japan.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I remember talking to a b-boy. He was probably maybe late 20s, early 30s. And I told him, yeah, that's funny you call it the atomic freeze. But I'm going to tell you, it's something you're going to relate with. I used to call it the ninja, and he bowed to me. He said, whoa, because he never knew it was called the ninja, you know? Yeah. That's very associated with the aesthetic culture.
Yes.
And so he actually liked that.
Man, there it is, everybody. The complete story to Icey-Ice in my book. Yeah. And I've seen interviews with you in the past. I think it was on B-Boy World or, you know what I mean? It was probably like 10, 15 years ago. But I was like, man, if I ever get a chance to speak to this dude, I said I'm gonna bring out all the history. And a lot of people's already rooting for me. They're like, bro, when you go out to the East Coast, we know you're gonna get the grit of the grit.
Well, I'm glad you had the opportunity, and believe me, it's equally a privilege for me, brother, that I can be able to do this interview with you.
Okay.
You know, like I said, you brought me back down memory lane and had me think about a lot of things that I haven't thought about in years. Yes. So it's been a pleasure for me as well.
Thank you, Corey. I appreciate it.
God bless, man.
Icey-Ice, everybody.
Peace.
Peace.